In today's LEGO City update, it's time to add the diagonally running tramline. This part was so difficult to build that it took me 2 entire days of preparation before I was even able to start filming today's update. And 10 seconds into the video, it's time for the first illegal building techniques, because I needed to fill up these little gaps of the curve. And what was also quite illegal is how exactly I integrated the tram tracks to the rest of the layout, because I was using a snot building technique in order to get the exact curvature as well as the angle of the diagonal. I was using slopes on both sides of the tram line, and this part was so difficult because I had to avoid any gaps of any sorts. There you can see it, how satisfying it is as soon as the tiling is added left and right of this tram line. I think these 2 days of preparation were time well spent in this area. And now, before continuing the paving, you can see this is the beginning of a new building, and I'm taking measurements of the corners, how I want to place this building into this little area. In order to add the building, of course, I have to first of all get rid of the studs, because this building is being placed at an angle and then continues around the corner following the tramline. Usually I only connect these buildings using 1 or 2 studs, and this is then more than enough to prevent it from accidentally moving. Now, I was also talking about this last video. I initially wanted to add a staircase on the other side right here as well, but unfortunately, as I was experimenting, the space simply wasn't enough for this area, and therefore I decided to add a simple rock face with a little statue integrated right there in order to make the rock face look a bit more interesting. And this is actually also quite realistic in older cities, simple little decorations added wherever there was enough space. Quickly finishing off this building right there. Of course, the interior is still missing, but now, after of course quickly having finished off the vegetation in front of the little statue and on top of the rocks, it's time for the most annoying part of last video and this video as well, which is this tiling pattern. You guys thought that it was a little bit too chaotic and wanted me to at least partially remove it. And therefore, although it took me 5 hours to rebuild the entire thing, I of course did it. My plan was now to add a little flower bed on the right-hand side of this train track in order to hide the transition between the tiling and whatever comes on the other side. For the straight section of the tramline, I simply decided to continue the dark bluish gray paving because, well, it's the cleanest of all the different paving possibilities I had. And now, when it comes to the flower bed, I of course had to fill up these little gaps on the sides. First of all using cut plates, and then on the other side, whatever was remaining, I covered up using leaves, a bit of flowers on top in order to add a bit of color. And now with the first little before and after picture of today's video, you can already see the immense difference these tiny improvements made in front. Now for the next 2 modules, these were fortunately enough much easier to build, because I simply had to integrate a straight running tramline to the city. And as I was experimenting with how exactly I wanted to continue this row of houses down there, I took this angled building from the upper platform and thought that it actually looked quite nice down there, and therefore decided, since I needed to add a corner building anyways up here, that I might as well design it. This is now the building progress every few hours, because it's of course quite difficult for me to film these new buildings while I'm designing, destroying certain parts, rebuilding them, and so on. Now focusing back on the lower section once again, we of course have to add details. This is, as always, the most important and also most fun part of building a LEGO city. And now another thing I wanted to add. I'm in fact not quite sure how many of you have these things in your country, because we're actually quite a international community right here. I know that here in Austria, as well as in Germany, of course the Netherlands as well, mail is often delivered by bikes, and therefore I thought I might as well design one of these little postman bikes with a box in front where the postcards, letters, newspapers and so on are then being transported and delivered. And in order to make that really clear to the viewer what exactly that was, I was now using jumper plates in order to have this effect of several different newsletters and so on being stacked on top of each other. Finally finished off with printed tiles, and then of course a little postman minifigure riding the bike and delivering mail. I'm not quite sure if these things exist, especially in the US. You can let me know that in the comments down below. I'm quite intrigued. Another thing I wanted to add is the second stop for the tram, because at the moment we only have the end station, and of course somewhere along the tram line we need to have different stops, and therefore I was simply designing one of these really basic roof covered stopping points points. Then I've also added 2 more garbage cans, 1 on each side, because that simply has to belong to such a stop. And now with that being added, we have to take a look at how the tram exactly runs, starting underneath this future bridge, stopping for about 10 seconds or something at this first stop, then going around the corner towards the end station, where it, I think, will stand about 20 seconds or so. And then of course the same thing happens in the other direction as we go around the corner, then stop for once again about 10 seconds or something at this middle stop. And then for the next few months at least, this is where the tram is going to disappear underneath this bridge I'm going to add. I've also talked about this quite a few updates ago, where it's then hidden, I guess, for a minute or so, and then afterwards the exact same procedure begins once again. And although at least for now there are only 3 stops along the entire tram line, in the long run these parts, I think I can't stress that enough, are going to be connected, and then the tram is going to disappear back there somewhere in between skyscrapers and so on. Just so you keep that in mind, this is of course quite short for now, but it will be extended in future. Now let's continue on the upper platform with the new house I've built. What was quite unfortunate is that I just ran out of pieces for that last window up there in the corner, but well, at least it's around the corner. Then when it comes to the interior, although I haven't designed anything yet, at least as we take that apart, I've already tiled the floor right there. And then, well, down there's nothing except the little staircase leading up to the first floor. And now this, of course, is once again my question for you. What do you want me to add as an interior for this building? Another thing I now of course have to switch up is that building, because of this facade right there. And there's actually another reason why I want to remove that building. You might have noticed that that building is quite similar to the building I'm going to remove, because I initially tried experimenting with this building in that corner, liked it, but it was a bit too big, and therefore I redesigned that building for this part. And what I'm now going to do is remove this building from this section, design a new corner building, and then place that behind this row of houses. And obviously, I want to have everything finished up, but since it's so far behind the entire city, you wouldn't really see it. So I'm not going to spend 3 days designing a new building, but instead simply going to reuse that building from the front. When it comes to all these buildings just in front of the Lego City, I unfortunately have to add different interiors for every single building, because first of all, I'm going to light everything up, and secondly, it's so close to the visitor. As you can see, I'm standing right here in front of the city, and therefore you can literally see inside the windows, see every single minifigure and everything that's going on. And therefore, this is the most important section when it comes to adding interiors for the different buildings. Then before showing you today's before and after picture, since nobody was really satisfied with how the tiling turned out last time, including me by the way, I've now redesigned this part, added a flower bed along the train tracks, which I honestly prefer. What I can't switch up is how this inner part of the curve looks. Otherwise, this would be the only possibility to switch up the entire tiling in this section, but I don't really like that. This part is still empty because I somehow have to create the transition down towards the harbor. And now, when it comes to today's before and after picture, on the other side we worked on, this is what it looked like before, and obviously today's progress with 2 entire new buildings being added to the city is massive. I absolutely love today's progress. And with that being said, that's it for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you again in the next one.